I know. My last video was a Star Wars video. Typically I like to do some variety, but you know me. I'm a maverick, a rule breaker. Infinities: A New Hope was a book I wanted to read for a long time because the concept was intriguing. It is a what-if style comic that sees pivotal moments in the adapted movie go differently and how that changes the universe of Star Wars as a result. That also means this is a non-canon or Infinities entry in the Star Wars universe, not being involved in any of the main continuities, those being canon, Legends, or the Marvel Comics continuity from the 1970s. Technically, canon has a tier system, but like I said, I'm a maverick and a rule breaker, and I determine my own damn canon based on what makes sense. So this will be on my Master Star Wars playlist under Infinities. Also, make sure you check out that playlist. I have about 35 Star Wars videos in there. That was a shameless plug, but whatever. I'm a maverick like Tom Cruise. I just went rogue like Tom Cruise. Star Wars Infinities: A New Hope was written by Chris Werner, a Dark Horse veteran who did everything at that company. Along with writing this book, he did covers on Star Wars Legacy 38 and 49, as well as having edited the Dark Forces Jedi Knight novella. The art on the book was done by Drew Johnson, who worked on a few projects at Dark Horse, including the Star Wars X-Wing series. Originally, Peter David was supposed to write the book. He is known primarily for work at Marvel Comics, but he also did some Star Trek novels, an earlier short for Star Wars Tales, Skippy the Jedi Droid, and Peter David was given total creative freedom by Lucasfilm, only for his pitch to be denied because, it was a bit much. So, much like the final story, Leia becomes a Sith, though in his version, Luke becomes her apprentice and lover, with them, I guess, finding out they're siblings, and I guess they were just accidentally doing incest. Lucasfilm probably regretted offering the man creative freedom since the story was just a bit too weird to put out. The natural issue with Luke not knowing Leia was his sister when developing the characters early on was that Luke really thinks his sister's hot in some novels like Splinters of the Mind's Eye and some of the early Marvel Comics issues. They would try to retcon this, and as time went on, they basically just hand wave it as Luke basically proclaiming he thought his sister was hot, and I don't know, in like a sister kind of way, I guess. I don't know. It was something they wanted to move past, and Lucasfilm thought to bring it back to the forefront for edgelord factor went a bit too far for their marketing team. I'm inclined to agree with them on this point. Anyways, Peter David was pissed at Lucasfilm and said things don't always turn out that way in real life, and they really could have been bunkin' siblings if they didn't know. Regardless, even following Disney's acquisition of Star Wars and its move back to the primary Marvel Comics publishing line, Peter David's de facto comics home, and the publisher he's worked with the most over the years, he still hasn't touched the franchise since. Peter David has been working since the 80s though, and this isn't his first strange controversy or feud, so I'm sure maybe we'll touch on Peter David more on this channel. The book opens on the Battle of Yavin with Luke making his trench run, though rather than making the successful shot that takes out the Death Star, he fails to hit the mark, and the Death Star wasn't destroyed, with Yavin 4 being destroyed by the Death Star and the rebellion brought to its knees. Luke and Han flee alive, but Luke is losing it over his failure. Leia and the other rebel leaders are captured by the Emperor and Vader, though the Emperor decides to start Leia's training in the dark side on Coruscant. From here, the ghost of Obi-Wan tells Luke he needs to train with Yoda on Dagobah, much like he would in The Empire Strikes Back, and, much like the film, he enters the cave on Dagobah to see Darth Vader, who he duels, but when he strikes down Vader, the face under the mask is Leia's. The book jumps 5 years, and the Empire has gained an iron grip on the galaxy, with Leia having taken her place at Darth Vader and the Emperor's side. They also renamed the Death Star to the Justice Star for some reason. Leia has the Emperor reinstate the Imperial Senate. Han is back to his smuggling ways and sees a broadcast of the 5th anniversary of the Rebel defeat, where he notices Leia is now a servant of Palpatine, which causes him to rush to Dagobah to meet up with Luke. Han and Chewie arrive as Luke is finishing his Jedi training, and they meet Yoda, who lets the cat out the bag about Leia being Luke's sister and Darth Vader being their father. The group, including Yoda, head off to Justice Star, and Yoda mind tricks Tarkin, destroying the Imperial fleet, while Han and Luke infiltrate the Imperial palace and confront the Emperor, Darth Vader, and Leia. Luke duels Leia, but reveals that she's his sister, which shocks her into joining the light side as Vader attacks the Emperor and is killed, but held him off until his kids could escape. The group blast off as Yoda crashes the Justice Star into Coruscant, literally obliterating everyone on the planet, as well as the Justice Star, in the name of justice, I guess. Leia becomes Supreme Chancellor of the New Republic, the end. Luke fails in this continuity, which is the big character difference, though this failure is a temporary hiccup. At one point, right after he fails to destroy the Death Star, he threatens Han Solo's life, but Ben Kenobi calls to him through the Force, causing him to veer back to the light side. He then confronts Vader and the Emperor in a different context, but largely similar to the way he would in Return of the Jedi, and I guess it all works out in the end. Leia turns to the dark side, which I think is the more interesting moment in this comic. Seeing Leia as a Sith Lord was cool. She turns back awfully fast, but I suppose that's kind of the nature of a 4-issue miniseries. Though on that note, she does at least duel Luke briefly, which I think is something that was sort of what people wanted to see with the series, so I can't be too mad at that decision. Han Solo is virtually unchanged, the book bringing up the idea that Han never succeeded, thus never getting the rebellious spirit. Though immediately after the time jump, he risks it all to confront Leia and becomes the same scoundrel we know and love from the films. Yoda serves the same purpose as he does in the films, but decides to decimate Coruscant. The wise Jedi mage went totally off the rails, unhinged and frankly genocidal. I was shocked by this decision by the writer, but it is what it is. Darth Vader doesn't really change, he's just put in a slightly different spot. He succeeded, so he continues to rule at the Emperor's side until he sees his son and daughter's bravery and the fact that they are his kids, which turns him back to the light side and fight the Emperor, costing him his life. Dare I say, he is virtually unaffected by the change in circumstances. I almost think Leia should have killed Darth Vader, or the Emperor dies and Leia becomes Vader's number 2 while he is the Emperor. That would have involved killing off the Emperor though, which wasn't the angle they chose, I guess. Anyways, with all that said, there isn't really anything to add to my notes on the Emperor. His plans just went smoother, he continued to rule, and we see a slight progression on what would have happened had he not had to fight the rebels. The book's art is good. It's not excellent or super stylized, but it's serviceable and it's easy to tell who's who, with the action being pretty dramatic. Typically, I try to put my finger on a tone. It is important in really describing a book's feel, and for this book, I can't decide, so I'll just say a bit schizophrenic. And yes, I have the pass to say that. My dad's schizophrenic, and this seems like some shit he would cook up if he was to write a Star Wars book, I guess. Overall, it's kind of like the Star Wars prequels in the way that, from a writing standpoint, this book is awful. However, there's something weirdly fun about it for a non-canon book. If Yoda in a canon project commandeered the the Justice Star, and did a kamikaze attack on Coruscant, decimating the Justice Star and presumably causing an extinction event on Coruscant, which according to the BBC's Science Focus magazine has an estimated population of around 3 trillion people, not to mention the supposed population of the Death Star of around 2 million people, bringing the death toll up to approximately 3,2,000,000 deaths caused by Yoda. If they did that in canon, I'd be pissed. Yoda would never do that shit. But honestly, this is Star Wars Infinities. Emphasis on Infinities. So I'm cool with it. In fact, I was so floored by that moment alone, and the fact that Yoda did that I feel, off the merit of that moment alone, this book is a worthwhile read. But other moments, like Luke dueling Leia, is sort of a fun moment that I think makes this book fun if nothing else really clicks. Is this comic good? Hell no. It's fun for sure, and it's something at least. Well, Star Wars Infinities: A New Hope was bizarre to say the least, but it would lead to 2 other non-canon deviations on the story of Star Wars, naturally including Star Wars Infinities: The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. No worries though, we'll get back to all that sooner or later.